5.
It's 5 of 7. Still a little dark out. You can see there's snow on the shooting table there, and also on the leaves. It's hard to see, but they're there. It's there. This should be gone pretty quick because it's 30 degrees out, or 31 degrees, so as soon as the sun comes out it should warm up enough to get rid of this stuff.
I think it's supposed to be 42 today.
42 is a high today?
I think that's what I
Yeah.
saw on my iPod. With the flowers that...
Well guys, it's gotten a little bit lighter out. You can see the temp there. We got some critters out here doing their thing on the bird feeder. See, the roof of the greenhouse is covered. Looks like the bird bath is frozen. It's supposed to go up into the 40s today, so we should lose this. I don't know what the rest of the week is. Do you know what the rest of the week weather is, hon?
I think it's going to warm up some.
I hope so. Just a little bit after I get the parts for the backhoe.
Still have your coffee, and
Every year the Blue Jays in the wintertime come to the feeder more than they do any other time of the year. I've seen as many as 15 of them. There's one. There's another one up there. I like hearing them in the woods when I'm hunting. And with their screeching or whatever. One thing about old steel is it's also cold steel when it comes to winter time. Got a little dusting of snow last night. It's not sticking on the ground because the ground is not frozen, that's for sure. But I've got to get my hoses put away today, and first I'm taking Bullseye for a walk. I'm gonna ride, he's gonna walk. Hey YouTube. Well, I didn't get to record any of the fixing of the fenders on the car here, because, or I mean not the fenders, the rocker panel, because I left the camera in the car, or the other truck I mean, and it had to go for a ride today, so that meant that I didn't have a camera. Here today is I need to put brake lining on the car, and I've already done the back. My truck came back today or tonight, so I figured I would make this little video here of changing the front brakes on this Blazer. If you're any kind of a mechanic at all, brakes is something you've probably already done, but just in case there's people out there that haven't done it, I don't know if you can see this, but let me zoom in a little closer here and get you down a little lower. Yeah, so you can see how much dirt, like there's a lot of dirt on this car because of the road, the stones and whatnot. I don't know. Sometimes, I mean, I like living in the country, but I gotta tell you, sometimes doesn't just, it seems like it just doesn't pay. Bigger socket there. So I don't think I've paid to have brake lining put on a car. Well, let me think for a second. I haven't paid to put brake lining on one of my vehicles ever. I never have. The first thing I think I learned when it came to actually cars, not motors, but cars, was that I had loosened them before, in case you're wondering. The first thing I ever learned about cars was to change brakes. And it was a little more involved than it is now because, you know, when you had the drum brakes, there was a bunch of springs and stuff in there. Once you got the hang of it, it was pretty good, unless you were changing vehicles, like from one vehicle to another. Because when you did that, sometimes the springs were set up differently, but nonetheless, it has evolved. And right now, what we see here is pretty easy compared to what it used to be. So there's two bolts here that the threads go through the frame of the brake. The brake has a frame here that goes around, okay, and inside there is where the caliper is. Well, this goes through the frame and leaves this rod stick through, and that's what the shoes as well as the caliper slide back and forth on when you step on the brakes. So what I do with this, and I'm sure that everybody has their own way of doing it, but what I do with this is I put anti-seize compound on here, and it seems to help keep them sliding pretty nicely. So you take the two bolts out on a Chevy here, and put these down here. And I usually just set this on top of the housing here. You got to watch that, you know, you don't tear the lines or anything like that, but this usually works pretty good for me here. The shoes on this side are actually not that bad, okay, but I'm going to change them, and I'm going to keep these as spares because I want all new brakes on the car. This way here I can keep track of when the last time was that I did it, because I don't remember. So, and I didn't mark this down, which I will mark it down now that I have these off. But you can see that the brake pad is relatively good. In fact, if you compare that to one of the new ones here, you might have about a, I don't know, maybe a third of the life off of that. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's not much. But either way, I still want to put new ones on. Okay, so with the new brake pads, there's these little clips. Now, you want to make sure you have the right ones in here, but they have a little piece of metal protruding out, and that metal is what rides on the rotor and starts making like a screeching sound. So when you hear the screeching sound, that means that you need to get brakes, and you need to get them relatively soon. Now, I've explained to my wife a couple of times what that screeching sounds like, but she doesn't always remember. So therefore, sometimes the brake shoes go way too far before they get changed. So all you do is there's a groove here on each side of this. You just put that metal clip on and then slide the brake shoe into the brake pad into that clip. there's really not much you can do with this. You could, sometimes I do put a little bit of oil or something, or a little bit of grease, not oil, grease inside here to help this thing to move, but it's really not, it's not that necessary because the pad cleans the rotor as it brakes. That's part of the good thing about disc brakes. So then what I do is, you want to push these cylinders back into the caliper, okay? So there's a number of ways you can do it. Sometimes I use old brake lining, but since I want to keep these, I'm not going to do that. So what I'm going to do is just put a flat piece of wood on top of these two, and then I'll put a C-clamp on it to pull them back in. So I'll put a piece of wood on top of that, and I'll take and open up a C-clamp so that I can grab the back of the caliper with the C-clamp. Now they make regular tools for this, but to buy the tool just for the brakes doesn't make any sense to me when a C-clamp does the same thing. You can see I'm pushing these pistons here back into the caliper. So once it's flat in there, then you just release that, and then you can take the caliper and put it back on top of the brakes. Now you want to be careful, there's these rubber, I don't know if you can see them now, let me see if I can bring it in here. Yeah. So the bolts that I was showing you, these pins, go through here, and there's a nut inside of this that this screws into. This threads into this frame, and then the caliper slides back in. So that bolt that I was showing you before, this looks like this. Let me back up a little bit here. Goes inside through the caliper and then into the frame that holds the caliper. Okay, and what I do, and I'll show you from back here. What I do, and I'm not saying you should do it, because I don't even know if it's recommended by the manufacturer, but when you come from the old school, there's a lot of things that you learn about. There's a lot of things you learn about lubrication. So anyway, what I like to do is I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on this thing. So I'll put anti-seize on this, and this keeps this so that it can slide, but yet this stuff doesn't turn to oil so rapidly from heat. So you just stick that through where the bolt, where the nut is there on the caliper. My battery went dead again. I've got to get new batteries soon. So I use this anti-seize, okay, and I put some on the bolt. Not a lot, just a little bit. Now I don't recommend that you do this. I always do this. And the reason I don't recommend it is because I don't really know whether Chevy recommends it or not. Anti-seize doesn't hurt rubber seals or anything, and there's no real seals. There's a rubber boot there that protects this thing from getting dirt in it. But I don't know if they recommend putting anti-seize on there or not. But I'm putting it on. I always have. I've had this car for, well, since 2003, I think it is, and never had any trouble with them. And I've changed the brakes a lot on this car, because going up and down that mountain, my wife is a little bit heavy on the brake pedal because of, the way the mountain road is. It's all windy and everything, so she does use the brakes up pretty well. And I usually I don't buy the best brand, but I don't buy the least expensive either. So it's kind of like a middle brand, because you only get ripped off when you buy, the big one. So now, the one thing I want to say though is, when you have this all part like this, there's a grease zerk here There's probably one on the bottom. If there's any on the tie rods and stuff, now would be the time to do that. Okay, so you know, if you have a grease gun handy, you want to do it now while the wheel's off. Makes it a little bit easier. These little plastic caps are a real nuisance because usually you cross thread them, or if you don't. What I do when I take the car to get it inspected is I used to take the caps off because this car is so old and she's lost a couple already. I don't even bother with it. But I put the gun on number 1 to put them on so you don't cross thread them. So as soon as you see that that it's not moving, then you know you're good. You want to be careful with that. You're better off using this socket like this with your hand to put those plastic covers on so you don't hurt them. You can see she's already lost a wheel cap here. They don't say anything about that for some reason in Pennsylvania, so I don't worry about it. Besides, those things are like 27 bucks for one that I saw on eBay one time. I think somebody goes around collecting them and sells them back to you later. So anyway, that's pretty much, you know, what you do with the brakes. I got to do another one over there, so if I missed anything, I'll show it to you over on the other side. So that is ready to go. One thing I will say about brakes, when you use the C-clamp, like I did there, when you use the C-clamp to push the calipers, or I mean the pistons down into the caliper, you want to be careful when you get in the car. You want to leave the car in park, start the car, and then pump the brakes until you have a pedal. You know, and what I mean by a pedal is that you have resistance up off the floor. You don't just get in the car, start it, and then back up, because you won't have any brakes for the first 10 seconds until you pump them up a little bit to get the fluid where it's supposed to be. So again, if you never did brakes before, I'm not a brake mechanic. I've been changing my own brakes all of my life, but this isn't a how-to. This is what I do. Alright, that's all I'm showing you, what I do. So guys, on my 89 Chevy, this is a 2003 Blazer. On my 89 Chevy, I have aluminum wheels. Now, I'm not sure of what kind of an alloy it is. And an alloy, for those of you who may not know, is just, you know, a makeup of the metal, what's in the alloy. Now, these lug nuts that are on here are steel lug nuts, and I never have a problem getting these off the car. But on my 89 Chevy, I have a real hard time getting lug nuts off of my car, off of the truck I mean, because they seem to fuse to the wheel. So on my 89, not the Blazer here, but on my 89, the lug nuts, when you tighten them in to the wheel, you can't get them off. At least you can't get them off with a breaker bar, you can't get them off with a ratchet, I don't care what you use, you just can't get them off. And it got to the point where I literally had to take a hole saw for one of the nuts that would not come off. And I literally cut a hole into the wheel just so I could break it free to get it off the truck one time. So if you're driving somewhere and you don't have a whole truckload of tools with you, you may not be able to get your wheel off. So what I do, now I'm not recommending this again because Chevy doesn't say to do this, but I do it because it works for me. If I put a little bit of anti-seize along this mouth here, this tapered shiny part that goes against the wheel, I put anti-seize on my 1989 truck wheels, never have a problem getting the wheel off. As long as I put a little bit of that on, and I don't have any problem with anything moving or anything like that, or loose lug nuts, nothing. Okay? But again, it's something you should talk to your mechanic about, or talk to the factory, or whoever you want to talk to. Don't take my word for it, because just because I've been doing it doesn't mean you should do it. But anyway, that's what I do on my 1989 Chevy truck to be able to get the wheels up. And I'm telling you, they are tight. They're unbelievably tight. Alright, so here we go with this again here. And in case you missed something on the other one, there's 2 bolts. Let me back up a little bit. There's 2 bolts in the back here that this thing slides on. So there's one here, and there's one down at the bottom. Okay, and this is a size 18. You know, I don't think it. I think that in order to give somebody wrench sizes while you're going, I don't really see the purpose in that, because the way I look at it is, if you can't figure out what size nut or something is, maybe you shouldn't be doing the work. Of course, I'm from the old school, and maybe our ways aren't your ways. I don't know if you've ever seen that trick, but if you use a bigger wrench, you can use that as leverage to get really tight bolts off. This is the one thing I don't like about living in the country, man. That's why we keep our cars so long. Because in order to get your money out of them, you've got to keep them until they die, or else you lose money all the time. It costs you money to drive the car. You know, just to, like, I don't know if you've ever sat down and figured it out, but I have. If you sit down and figure out how much a car costs, it costs a whole lot less for a car that's older to drive it, you know, mile by mile, than it does for a brand new car, because of all the insurance and everything else, and the price of parts on newer cars seem a lot higher than they are for older cars. So what I do is I try to keep the car running, keep the inspection, you know, good, so that there's no problems, and that way there I get my money out of the car. Now, is it look really good driving this beat up thing down the town? No, but guess what? I really don't care what somebody else thinks. What I care about is that the car runs good, my wife can take it wherever she wants to, I don't have to worry about her getting stuck. But, so, doing this work is a savings to begin with, because I can remember an aunt of mine went to go get some brake lining put on her car, and this is back in the 1970s, because I can remember I was doing some stuff with one of her kids, and it cost her like $400, $100 a wheel to change brakes, which, you know, is kind of ridiculous. When the whole brake lining there cost me, I think, $42 for all of the lining, or the pads rather. So I showed you how to take the caliper off before. What I do is, when the calipers are on here, I put a screwdriver underneath and just pry a little bit. You don't want to break anything, but you just pry to loosen the caliper and get it so that it's not grabbing a hold of the wheel with the brake lining. Now again, you can see this brake lining is pretty good on here. But like I say, I'll save this lining for during the year. I usually have to change brake lining twice a year. Doesn't matter what's going on, it's twice a year or else, because of how the roads are around here on that steep hill. So I'll just save that stuff, put it in the box there, and sometime by, I'd say, summer, next summer possibly, what I'll do is just put this lining back on here just for a couple of months, and then I'll put brand new lining on it, like I am now when it comes time to get the car inspected next October. And what that does is it helps to to save a couple dollars on brake lining. I'm not, even though it takes more time to put 2 sets on, gotta be done anyway, and I'm still only buying like 1 set then. So in other words, I buy 1 set, I take them off, I put another set on in October, a brand new set, and then mid-year I'll take and put the old set back on because they're still good yet, and that means I only bought 1 set of brake lining for the whole year. Now I know you might be thinking to yourself, well, you're saving money here, you're saving money there by doing it yourself. You know, maybe you could do something different with the lining. You know, put more new on all the time or whatever. Well, that's not how I was raised. I was raised to not throw away money, so I don't. Again, now you can see the last time I put this on I had used anti-seize. The problem with this here is it's getting a little bit gummy on this, so I'm going to clean these off. I'll be back. I'm going to clean them off and then put some more stuff on there. So here we have the caliper. I'm going to take this block of wood, put it across there. I'm going to put this clamp over the wood. Now, I need to make sure I'm not pushing on any. You want to make sure you're not pushing on any kind of brake lines or anything. And just put the clamp in the middle of this, making sure you're not pushing on brake lines, okay? Because you'll break the line off or you'll put a hole in it. And then I just turn this to put that back in there. Now they make some tools that are pretty neat. You can just turn them in there right from the front. I don't think they're that much money, but like I say, you know, I've been doing this with a C-clamp for as long as I can remember. The C-clamps hang right on my bench nearby. There's a whole slew of all different sizes of them, and that's what I use. So now you also don't want to leave this caliper hang free. You can wire it up or whatever you want, but what I'm doing there is just setting it on the A-frame, or the A part, the heck do they call that? The control arm. So when you put these clips on, you want to make sure that they're down here facing in towards the brake. And there's 2 different ones, so you want to make sure, like you see this one here, this clip doesn't quite go on there all the way, and if you put it on this way, it's on backwards. This won't leave it come on there, so you got to find the right one. I have a bunch of them in my hand here. And make sure you use the right one. Yeah, so that's how that would, I don't know if you can see that. These clips, you can, if you put them on wrong, they're not going to work, and you probably won't be able to get the shoe on. So you want to make sure that they're on there the right way before you put the shoe onto the frame there of the brake where the caliper gets bolted. Okay, so I'm going to go over this again. These clips, you want the straight edge on a Chevy anyway, facing the rotor, both sides, okay? This way here, if the brake wears unevenly or whatever, it'll still signal you that it needs to be replaced. So then you'll slide those inside of these grooves, both sides. Okay, so that's that one. Now we want to put these clips on here and make sure they're facing the right way, up towards the rotor or to the asbestos or whatever type of material this is. Okay, keep holding them on there, make sure they're going to stay on, and then slip them in the back here into the grooves that are back there. I'm going to have to move the camera so I can look back there. Alright, so I have that back shoe on there, and they're nice and flush against the rotor. You can see the rotor's not moving there, sort of snug in there. And again, and like I say, you need to find out if this is something that GM recommends or don't recommend, but I'm just saying what I do. And so I'm going to pull the caliper back over top of this. And then I'm going to put a little bit of this anti-seize on here. Now, one of the things about anti-seize, let me just tell you, when you're using it on these, you want to put it on really lightly if you're going to try it. And like I say, I don't recommend you do it until you've read your manual. But anti-seize gets a little bit plasticky at times when it's on a long time. So if it does get a little plasticky, especially at this end, it's liable to keep the brake shoe from working. So you know, I'm changing brakes all the time because of this road I live on. If you don't change brakes on a regular basis, or you know, whatever your situation is, you want to check out and see what your story is. Like, you know, is this a good idea for you? Because I'm not telling you to do it here. I'm just showing you that I do this. So I'm putting those bolts back in there, and that's all there is to it for changing these brake pads. You want to make sure you snug them up good. And again, you know, grease zerks that you find on the car, wherever they are. Read your manual, it'll tell you if you have any. Some cars nowadays have nothing. I'm glad that these do, especially on the ball joints, because ball joints can cost you $1,500 to replace. Now, how tight you torque that, I do it my way. I just snug it as tight as I can make it. And what you need to do is read your book. It'll tell you what the specs are for all of that stuff, how tight they should be and everything. Alright, so I usually put a stud up so I can locate it and put the wheel back on. I guess it's around 9 o'clock or so. My wife should be hollering for me soon. She doesn't like when she says I'm away from her all day. She doesn't want me away from her all night as well. And I don't blame her, but I'm working on her car. I told her she can't go shopping until I'm done with the car, so don't ask. So today she started saying something about, oh, I'm going to need my car, and I'm going to need my car soon. I'm not rushing you, she said. I'm going to need my car. another job off the list. So the car is done. All I have to do, that's on the bottom of the rocker panels, that's a primer. So tomorrow I'll be painting this, and then she can have the car back. That's the moon. It's pretty late already. It looks like it's due south of me. But anyway, not a full one. Time for get a shower and relax. Have a good one, guys. Bye.